Hello, and welcome to the Metta Hour podcast with Sharon Salzberg. I'm Lily Cushman, and I produce this podcast. And welcome to our first episode of 2026. We're beaming in with another episode in our ongoing kids series in honor of Sharon's brand new children's book, which came out in December, Karl, a little crocodile with big feelings. Today we are welcoming the wonderful Richie Davidson back to the podcast. He's been a guest here before. And if you don't know who Richie is, he is a professor of psychology and psychiatry at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's also the founder and director of the Center for Healthy Minds. He's most commonly known for his work studying emotion and the brain, and he's also BFFs with the Dalai Lama. So we're happy to have him here. He's someone who felt like an important addition to this series, talking about the ways that meditation and mindfulness can impact young minds and bodies, and of course, the caregivers of young children, educators, and the likes. So it's a great way to launch our year in podcasts. And in this conversation, Sharon and Richie start by talking about the 4 pillars of human flourishing that Richie's put together through his work, and the ways that those aspects exist in young people and those pillars that develop later on in adolescence. Richie shares about his kindness curriculum, which is available in English and in Spanish, and the difference between the formation of enduring traits as opposed to just passing moments of experience. He and Sharon look at loving kindness through the lens of it being a training and the myriad of ways that we are truly malleable. Richie shares about some interesting research in the ways that flourishing is contagious and the ways that our own experience can alter those around us. He talks about the importance of changing our narratives and some really interesting information about affective neuroscience. They also discuss different basic emotional styles and how that relates to young folks and the way that they can learn these tools. And Richie also shares some great research that's coming out of the school system in Louisville, Kentucky, that is the evolving education space in the K through 12 age range. Lastly, there's some discussion about the evolution of contemplative neuroscience, what exactly that is, how it's come to be, and the ways that community can serve as a contemplative type of intervention. Richie closes things out with a lovely meditation, and this is a really science-backed episode, which felt like an important aspect of this series that we wanted to include. So before we dive into the episode, a couple quick announcements. Karl, the book, is now available in all the places in hardback and ebook formats. And this is an illustrated book, if you haven't seen a copy of it yet, for 4 to 8-year-olds, though we're finding some older kids are really enjoying it as well. And it looks like we're going to continue this series intermittently moving forward into the new year. So you can expect a few more episodes on this topic specifically. Aside from that, since it's January, it is time once again for the Real Happiness Meditation Challenge. And this is something that Sharon runs every year during the month of February. It's a 28-day program that is offered totally on a sliding scale basis. So if you are looking to renew a practice, to begin a practice for the first time, or you feel you really benefit from the power of doing practice in a community, then you can head over to our website and learn more about it and maybe sign up. So that's at SharonSalzberg.com, and we've been doing this for many, many years now. It is a real favorite amongst Sharon's course students. Each week is covering a different genre of meditation. So you really get a wide range of different techniques, tools, tips, all garnered from Sharon's over 50 years of teaching experience. So that's all for now. Let's get into this wonderful conversation. Sharon Salzberg and Richie Davidson.
Hello, Richie, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sharon.
I mean, it's such a huge delight, and I'm so grateful. Where are you today? Are you in Wisconsin?
Yes, I'm in Madison at our center, and it's a beautiful, sunny winter day that's actually not too cold. It's above freezing. So people are outside with almost naked now because it's warm at 36 degrees.
Oh, my God. It's like in Burma when it turns like down to 95. People put on scarves and things like that, and sweaters, Too much. Well, thank you so much for being here today. It's been, I think, since 2023 since we last spoke for this podcast, and it's so wonderful to have you join us as part of the series we're doing for young people. You have such an amazing knowledge in the fields of psychology and psychiatry and contemplative neuroscience, which is an interesting new phrase, relatively new. So I'm so grateful to hear your perspective. And the inspiration for this series is the publication of my first children's book, Kind Karl, written with Jason Gruhl. And just like Kind Karl, the process of regulating our emotions in day-to-day life has an intrinsic connection to our mental well-being, obviously. And your work often describes mental well-being through 4 pillars: awareness, connection, insight, and purpose. And I'm wondering, how do these show up in the minds of children? Do they have a sense of purpose, for example?
Yeah, those are all great questions. Let me begin by first saying that I love that you are working in the children's space now, Sharon, and I think you have so much to contribute to this space. And I just want to share with listeners that just yesterday I was reading Kind Karl to my 5-year-old granddaughter who just loved it.
I'm so happy.
And so I highly recommend it. So regarding these 4 pillars, these are 4 key pillars that we came up with that basically represent the overlap between what we know from a Western scientific perspective and what we've gleaned from a contemplative, particularly a Buddhist contemplative perspective, on what are the key skills that are essential for human flourishing. And we came up with these 4 that are both represented in the scientific literature as well as in the contemplative traditions: awareness, connection, insight, and purpose. And so you asked a very pointed question about whether young people have a sense of purpose. And I would say it depends on how young and what age range we're talking about, what developmental range. So these are 4 pillars that we see in adults. But the question of how they evolve over the course of development is quite interesting. And it has not really been fully articulated. But what I would say is that awareness and connection are there from the start. They are really part of the program that we begin with, so to speak. And that insight and purpose evolve over time. They are not there from the start. It doesn't mean they're not innate, but they're just not there from the start. And so I think that most developmental psychologists would say that purpose really first begins to emerge around the time of adolescence.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. I remember the curriculum that you worked on for research purposes, and which was really about compassion and connection. And does it seem that that's like a ready doorway to development for younger kids?
Yeah, absolutely. So we developed this curriculum that we call the kindness curriculum. And for those listeners that are interested, it's freely available on our website in both English and Spanish. Um, and we developed it to see if these are skills that can be taught to. This was designed for preschool children, for really kids age 4 to 6 years. And we did actually a randomized controlled trial of the impact of the kindness curriculum, and we showed that it can increase prosocial behavior and also increase skills of self-regulation more generally. And so there's a lot of other evidence that suggests that humans come into the world with an innate predisposition for kindness and for social behavior. This is our a natural predilection, if you will. It's our natural orientation. And when we do practices that, you have spent so much of your life teaching, Sharon, I don't think we're creating something de novo just out of nothing, but rather we're actually, one way to think about it is we're actually familiarizing ourselves with our true nature. Because this is our true nature, to be kind and to be cooperative, to engage in prosocial behavior.
So I'm wondering too, in difficult times, when there are tremendous challenges in someone's life, whether it's in one's family or somehow one is touched by them, if it's happening in the larger world even, and we can be so vulnerable to life's ups and downs. And I'm wondering what kind of early life stressors has your research found to potentially have a lasting impact on brain development? And I also hesitate to say lasting as though that meant permanent.
Yeah. These are huge issues and super important. And I have a lot to say about all the different nuances. First, on this last issue of long lasting, and some people use the word permanent. I am really super reticent about using the word permanent for anything. First, as a good Buddhist practitioner, I don't really.
You're right.
That's kind of at a philosophical level almost. But when people say that something is permanent, it's like, show me the data. Have you really tried to change it? And even with really horrific trauma, we did a study a number of years ago that's published. It's a real scientific study with teenage girls in the country of Colombia who have been horrifically abused, and both physically, emotionally, sexually, and with colleagues there, and with Perla Coleman, who's a contemplative neuroscientist. We designed a summer camp that we freely offered to these teenagers. So it was very intensive. So basically, they were at this sleepaway camp. So you can think of this intervention that was occurring 24/7.
It's like a retreat, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a retreat for them. And what we showed is that even in cases of horrific abuse, we were able to produce really meaningful change over a very short period of time, including changes in their biology. We actually were collecting saliva samples, and we were looking at epigenetic changes. And we were able to show that there were changes that can occur as a consequence of this kind of intensive intervention. And so even in these, severe kinds of cases, we find that that's true. I also, this is just an anecdote, but someone sent me this amazing little video that was shot on a personal phone in Gaza during in the middle of the genocide that was occurring. And this little 6-year-old Palestinian girl had a plate of cookies that her mother baked for her or someone gave to her. And, she was obviously really hungry, had not been fed properly. And she was just sharing the cookies with strangers. Offering them to others, a spontaneous act of kindness in the middle of, just the worst kind of adversity that you can imagine. So, I think that one of the things that's been a key kind of insight for us is that even in cases of horrific abuse and trauma, or even more regular kinds of pathology, psychopathology, if you approach it from a strength-based approach and cultivate kindness and compassion and awareness, it turns out that is at least as effective as traditional treatments that focus on reducing the symptoms, but likely also produce added benefit in really improving well-being and not just decreasing the symptoms of stress and adversity. And there's reason to believe that these strategies are also likely to lead to more enduring change than the kinds of strategies that are focused on symptom reduction.
That's really fantastic to think about. You've hit upon also something I often say, which is that in all these years of teaching loving kindness as a meditative technique, I've hit upon like two main controversies that I keep facing. One is that people think loving kindness is stupid, and that it's sentimental, or that these days the word is appeasement, that you're just appeasing someone who's trying to hurt you. But the other controversy is that it can be cultivated, that loving kindness and compassion are not like, we don't have like a fixed dose. And if we don't have much, we're sunk, that these things can be trained, they can be cultivated, they can be nurtured. And that is, of course, very much a Buddhist perspective, that all of this is like malleable. Our whole being is malleable.
Yeah. And on that point, I think that, the evidence in the scientific literature today is incontrovertible that you can strengthen these skills. And it shows up behaviorally, it shows up biologically, and the other thing that I think is an important sort of tagline to add to this that I think most listeners will appreciate is that it's easier than you think. It's easier than you think because it's part of our true nature. And so when we begin to cultivate these skills, it really resonates with our innate propensity. And so for most people, most of the time, it's actually not that hard to get this going.
So emphasizing sort of the skills of kindness, you think, is something that the adults in a kid's life can engender to help nudge them along the continuum of resilience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another, important tagline for us these days, based on our research, is a very simple and yet radical idea, and that is flourishing is contagious.
Oh, nice.
Uh, and the evidence is really robust. If you are around people that are flourishing, it has impact on those around you and will positively impact them. We did a study recently, and it was, I won't bore listeners with all the scientific details, but it was a randomized controlled trial, super rigorous, in the public school system in Louisville, Kentucky. Very complicated, challenged school system. And we offered a well-being training to the educators. And what we found is that, the usual kind of change that we expected, where their well-being improved and symptoms of depression and anxiety and stress declined over the course of a month of training. But what really was the kicker was that we, by prior agreement, had access to the student grades and performance. And what we were able to look at is the performance of the students who are taught by teachers randomly assigned to the well-being training, and we compared them to students who are taught by teachers randomly assigned to a control group. The students had no idea that there was even any research going on. They were just going about their regular, their regular education and taking tests and so forth. And amazingly, what we found is that the standardized test scores of students who are taught by teachers that went through the well-being training, and loving kindness kinds of practices are really central to this. We found that those students actually did significantly better.
So great. It's sort of like, in the Buddhist texts, there are all these passages like, if you want to cultivate equanimity, hang out with people who have equanimity. If you want to cultivate kindness, hang out with people who have kindness. And it always, kind of the conversation was like, well, that's sort of elitist, isn't it? Why do you have to protect yourself in that way? But I appreciate that there's science behind that. This is kind of how things are. And as Bob Thurman would always say, the purpose of the path is to be realistic.
Yeah, exactly. And, we've both been around on great masters like the Dalai Lama, where you can kind of palpably feel that. But what the findings that, I'm talking about from Louisville, Kentucky, suggest is you don't have to be a great Lama. This is actually accessible to anyone.
Yeah. It's so great. And your 2017 book, seems like just yesterday, but your book Altered Traits came out in 2017, and you make the distinction between temporary states and lasting traits that can be shaped through practice. And when we think about mindfulness for children and families, what does it look like to move beyond like a calm moment or more peaceful moment to nurture enduring traits like resilience and kindness or emotional balance over the course of a child's development?
Well, I think what's really key here is repetition. And also this last little idea that we were discussing around flourishing being contagious. If the parent's demeanor is calm and connected and caring, and they're sending out those vibes, if you will, to their kids, and they do that on a regular basis, that is what leads to enduring change. And so I think the real key is consistency and repetition.
Your research institute, which is Center for Healthy Minds in Madison, Wisconsin, created a well-being toolkit for children and educators and parents, as well as the kindness curriculum. And I wonder if you can share more about that in practice, as well as some of your maybe personal highlights from these programs.
Yeah, well, thank you for mentioning that. They really revolve around our template, if you will, for understanding the key pillars of flourishing: awareness, connection, insight, and purpose. We have actually developed a curriculum around those 4 pillars. We've put it into the form of a mobile app called the Healthy Minds Program, which is produced by an affiliated nonprofit called Healthy Minds Innovations. And that app is freely available. There's absolutely no paywall, and you can download it wherever you get your apps. And that's something that a parent could do. This is a program meant for adults, although we've used it in college students, and we're developing a version now for teenagers that's not yet available. But college students seem to respond very, very well to it. And one of the insights that we've gleaned from research that we've done over the last several years is that even really small amounts of practice can make a big difference. And I'm talking about really small amounts of practice. So these findings, for example, from Louisville, Kentucky, and the teachers practice an average of 5 minutes a day for 28 days. That's it. And I think if you're talking about loving kindness and compassion practices, those are the kind of practices that most people find relatively easy to do, because they're really, we're born to be kind. And it's really helping people to simply become more familiar with their own true nature. And I should say, all of this is presented in a very accessible form in a new book that's coming out in March called Born to Flourish, that I've written with my colleague Cortland Dahl. And so for those listeners who are interested, you can check it out when it comes out.
Well, that'll be really exciting. I mean, I'm so glad that you have another book coming out, because something that you just said reminded me of my book, Kind Karl, and how Karl the crocodile, and by the way, I did have to learn the difference between a crocodile and an alligator for this moment. They have different noses. Did you know that?
Not exactly, but thank you for telling me.
Yes, different snouts, as we say. That the turning point in a way for Karl was when he made a mistake in spelling at school, and then he was miserable, and he had all these thoughts like, I'm stupid and I can't learn, and nobody likes me. And he learned to take those thoughts and put them in clouds and have them float away. And that was the beginning of him learning to be kind to himself instead of just ranting on himself. And with that as the basis, he determined to be kind to others and see what that felt like. And each time he felt better, when he shared his crayons or whatever with another creature. I keep saying people, but they're not people. They're like donkeys and, emus and things. And so there's that moment where we have to learn to deal with our thoughts and let them flow away if they're really harmful in some way. And so that seems to be like a skill that at some point a kid really needs to learn. As adults, we all needed to learn sitting in some retreat that the thoughts are just thoughts and we don't have to take them all to heart. So I wonder if you could say something about that.
Yeah, first, let me just say that I thought the way you had it illustrated in the book, Kind Karl, is fantastic.
That's great.
Literally, there are pictures of clouds with the thoughts written out in the clouds, sort of floating away. It's a beautiful and concrete way for a child to see that. And I loved that illustration. And I love the use of the cloud as a metaphor. We often use that as well. And, I think this is super important. This is, at least in part, some of what we would include in our insight pillar. And it's really learning to change our relationship to the narrative that we all have about ourselves. Every one of us has a narrative. It's really what human minds do. And sometimes, like with Karl, after he made his spelling mistake, he took on a negative narrative. And being able to shift your relationship to that narrative so that you can see them as simply thoughts and allow them to be treated like clouds that come and go is enormously helpful and can kind of unleash the natural kindness that we have within ourselves. And so this is something that that we train in our inside pillar and is so vitally important. And I think that the way you do it in Kind Karl is unique and very innovative. And honestly, I haven't seen a lot of work with children that's focused on one way to think about it simply as mindfulness of thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen that really treated particularly well in children, or most of the time it's not treated at all. And so, I think that one of the things I can envision, Sharon, is that Kind Karl becomes a kind of foundation for developing a more explicit program that can be tested in kids along these lines to see whether, and particularly, I think having kids see the illustrations
Right.
super helpful because it makes it really concrete. And I think that is a great aid for children. I've always wondered at what age we can introduce this kind of practice. And frankly, after reading Kind Karl, it makes me believe that we can introduce it in kids at a younger age than I thought may previously have been possible.
Well, I would love that. I think that's so exciting. And at the time we're recording, Kind Karl has just come out, and I've done a few programs, usually always with somebody who is, very experienced in teaching yoga to kids or bringing kids mindfulness techniques or something like that. And it's so cute. They're like so cute, and they're like, most of the kids have been much younger than I had anticipated, like 3 or 4 years old, and it was like another part of the book, Kind Karl has to deal with his anger and sadness when they do come up. And, he's kind of determined not to throw things or any things he used to do. So he has to learn new ways of expression. And one of them for us would be like, take a breath. And so I asked like these little 3-year-olds, what do you do when you get really upset and you shouldn't hit somebody? And they would say, I take a big breath.
Wow.
And you think, wow, look what you've learned, at your young age.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And, I think that's a testament to the extent to which the kind of work that you and I both do have really penetrated kind of the mainstream of education.
Yeah, no, it's great. So to go on, in your 2012 book, The Emotional Life of Your Brain, your research explores 6 basic emotional styles. And I wonder if you could say some more about these and how you observe them in relation to adolescent minds.
Yeah, so this other book, The Emotional Life of Your Brain, came out, as you said, more than 10 years ago. And it was a summary of really 30 years of work that I've done in what has become known as affective neuroscience, or the neuroscience of human emotion, and distilling across many years and research studies, I came up with these 6 styles, if you will. Every person has all 6 of these styles. We differ in where along the continua we fall within each of these styles. So you can think of these styles as continua. So to give some examples, one style has to do with attention, and it is specifically concerned with our capacity to focus our attention. Some people are more distracted, other people are more focused, and that lies on this continuum. And one of the things that we point out in the book in general is that where you fall on any one of these continua is simply where you fall right now, but each of these continua we know are associated with brain networks that show plasticity. That means they can be changed. They can be changed by experience, and they can be changed by training, such as meditation training. If there's one thing we know about simple mindfulness exercises, is that they can actually improve our attention. And there's now, hundreds of good research studies that show that. So attention is one of those dimensions. Another one that is one of the less obvious ones is what I call sensitivity to context. And sensitivity to context has to do with the extent to which we take into account the context in which we find ourselves in modulating our emotional responses. And so why this is important is because disorders like post-traumatic stress disorder is really fundamentally a disorder of context. And what do I mean by that? Well, one of the things that a person with PTSD might experience is if they hear a siren, for example, a police car siren or an ambulance siren, they may have, like a near panic attack and freak out in response to it. Even though they may be walking safely on a street, but it reminds them of some traumatic experience that they had. And so the safety of their environment you can think of as the context. And we all have been in situations where we're walking safely on a street, or we may be driving in a car and we hear a siren. We see it's an ambulance or a fire truck or whatever it might be. And we know that, that's what it is. And we are not fearful and do what we need to do to move over or allow them to pass or whatever the case may be, and then get on with the rest of our business. But people who have this problem often are triggered by these things. And so they're not fully processing the context in which they reside. And there's a really interesting neuroscience story around this, because the part of the brain that is so important for context is a part of the brain that is critical for memory. And this is a part of the brain that we call the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is one of the key structures that's been implicated in post-traumatic stress disorder. And people who are suffering from post-traumatic stress kinds of syndromes have frequently been found to have various kinds of abnormalities with their hippocampus. But this, again, is something that is very plastic. It can be changed. And in fact, the hippocampus is one of the parts of the brain that shows the most plasticity compared to other brain regions. And so by doing certain kinds of practices, we can strengthen these neural pathways and improve our ability to utilize context in our emotional decision making.
It's kind of amazing. Of course, I'm old enough so that neuroplasticity didn't even exist as a concept when I was, like in junior high school studying science. It's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, me too. It's when I studied neuroscience, we were taught that the brain is unlike any other organ in the body, and that once the brain is damaged, for example, it can't repair itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like cutting yourself on your skin. If you get a cut or an injury on your skin, we know that it will heal because new cells form. We thought that the brain was different, and it turns out that that was all wrong.
So interesting. And along those lines, in a way, about things not necessarily being all wrong, but subject to improvement, let's talk about the educational system for a moment. Like, I have been speaking with different educators, particularly for this series, and I've really been enjoying so many inspiring perspectives on how to transform educational systems with mindful learning. And I'm really curious from you, because I also remember the Dalai Lama being, I think, the first person that I heard really talk about bringing compassion into the educational system. And how does kindness in the classroom benefit students' actual learning? So, could you say some more about that?
Yeah. I think that this is just an enormously rich kind of opportunity, and we're seeing more and more various kinds of pilot programs be incorporated into education at different phases of the K through 12 education space. And there are programs that are focused primarily on students. There are other programs focused primarily on educators. There are other programs that focus on both. I think that most people would agree that if you can engage both constituencies, if you will, both students and teachers, that would be ideal. But in a resource limited environment, if you had resources that were scarce and you can only do one or primarily one, my strong belief is that it's strategic to focus on the educators. And the reason is because each educator is responsible for educating many students. Depending on what kind of school it is, the ratios can vary anywhere from, 1 to 20 to 1 to 200 or more. But a teacher clearly influences many students. And so you can have outsized multiplicative effects by working with the teachers who then interact with students. And actually, in our recent work in this big project we did in Louisville, Kentucky, we actually didn't just work with the teachers. We worked with the bus drivers, with the cafeteria workers, with the secretaries. We worked with everybody. We opened it up to every person who was employed by the Jefferson County Public School System. And in this way, we felt that we can produce more of a system-wide change by just including everyone in the mix. And one of the things we found is that in addition to the changes that I've already mentioned in well-being and sort of measures of depression and stress, we found that there was a change in the whole school climate where people trusted the administration more, and this increased trust led to a more positive overall climate in the entire system. And so I think that, and this, by the way, was an intervention that was delivered entirely digitally. So, it's not that I think that digital interventions are in any way better than in-person interventions. But if we're going to scale this massively, then I think we need to think about how we can harness the power of technology. And I know this is, controversial and complicated, but there are these proof of concept demonstrations that show that we can actually use this kind of technology in a healthy way to improve the school climate, improve teacher well-being, decrease these measures of depression and stress. We improve teacher retention in the profession, and we improve student outcomes. So there's a whole cascade of beneficial effects.
I love that idea of a system-wide intervention. That's my dream. It's been my dream for a long time, actually. And I remember talking to somebody who it didn't work out in the end, but she thought she could get a project going on a surgical part of a hospital where everybody, the patients, the janitors, the surgeons, the nurses, everyone could have a mindfulness practice available to them. And I thought, that's perfect. With like the whole mandala, so to speak, of everybody.
Yeah. And actually, that's the other sector that we've been working a lot with is healthcare providers. And we just finished another large project with healthcare providers in 5 of the poorest states in Mexico.
Oh, wow.
And with more than 2,000 healthcare providers. And the data are amazing. And this was also done as a rigorous randomized controlled trial. And we had the opportunity, and this is super new data some of this has been published. It just came out in JAMA Internal Medicine, the key findings with the healthcare providers. But there's another piece to this, which is very new, and that is we've been able to look at actual medical outcomes for the healthcare providers that went through the intervention compared to a control group. And we found on a number of different metrics improved medical outcomes, actual medical outcomes.
Wow, that's great.
First time anyone has shown this. And yeah, we're super excited about it.
Well, I'm super excited about it because, some of the groups that I've really worked with as much as I can have been caregivers of different kinds. And I've also noticed that, when I started doing those retreats, it was largely for people in the healthcare professions or other professions. And now it's also moved to so many people taking care of someone at home.
Yes.
And it's a whole other level of stress, honestly.
Yes, absolutely. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited about it all, and I wish we could just keep talking on because there's so much I'm learning and it's great. I'm wondering, you talk about community periodically from the Center for the Healthy Minds and really emphasizing the vital role of community and well-being, that it can help us feel confident and supported and able to keep going. And I'm wondering about kind of that larger sense of community helping shape a child's sense of well-being and what happens when families and children feel this shared sense of community together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is super important and I think plays a vital role, particularly over the course of early childhood development. And there's a variety of sort of mainstream psychological research that certainly supports the value of positive adult caregivers in a child's upbringing. With regard to how contemplative interventions may interact with that or facilitate that, particularly over the course of child development, there's relatively little that I'm aware of. but it's a vibrant area that's crying out to be done. And one of the things that is interesting to consider is, this kind of work can start really early. That is before birth, which is something that we've been super interested in, because we know that a mom's psychological environment when she's pregnant actually has effects on the developing fetus. Um, and the well being of a mother during pregnancy influences the neurodevelopment of the infant for at least 2 years after birth. And we've shown that in some hard nosed research where we've followed mothers starting in the second trimester of pregnancy. We follow them through birth and then put their babies in the MRI scanner, which we can easily do because they're sleeping most of the time. And we can actually look at their brains. And it turns out that the well-being of a mom during pregnancy is very significantly associated with brain development over the first 2 years of life. And so if we can intervene during pregnancy and promote well-being during pregnancy using simple contemplative strategies, we actually may be able to have a direct influence on the brain development of a fetus. And so this is, a new horizon of work. And there's a faculty member at our center, Sarah Short, who's a developmental neuroscientist who's actually studying this right now.
That's fantastic. Every once in a while, I meet a mom with a fairly young child, or one of my colleagues, this happens to them as well. And the mom will say, I listened to your guided meditations during my entire pregnancy, and I swear he knows your voice, or she knows your voice. And I say something, and the kid looks at me like, it's you,
That's
It's
super cool.
very
I
interesting.
love that. I love that.
And maybe just because we do have to close soon, I'm wondering if you could just tell us what contemplative neuroscience is. I feel like in a way I was witness to some of the birth of that, and it's very exciting.
Well, it's simply the neuroscientific study of contemplative practices. That's sort of one thing it is. I think at a higher level or a more abstract level, we can think of it as a hybrid discipline that is focused on how we can bring insights from neuroscience and insights from a kind of inner contemplative science together to give us a more complete and holistic picture of what it means to be human.
Nice. Thank you. And to close out our time together, I'm hoping you would lead us in a practice of some kind.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So let's all find a posture that feels comfortable but awake, not too tight, not too loose. And for this, you can keep your eyes closed or open, whichever is most comfortable. And let's simply begin by bringing awareness into our bodies. If we're sitting on a chair, maybe feel our sit bones. See if we can sense whatever sensations may be on our feet as they're touching the floor or wherever they may be. And simply noticing whatever is arising in our bodies, in our minds, and also in the space around us. And so if there are sounds that are occurring, simply being open and aware. And now I would invite us to bring into our mind and our heart our motivation for being here. Why did you choose to listen to this interview, this podcast? What is it that brings you to this path? And maybe also reflecting on those people in your life that may have introduced you to this path. And see if there is a sense of appreciation or gratitude that may spontaneously arise as you bring these people into our minds and our hearts. And as we end our time together today, one of the things we always do in the tradition in which I practice at the end of any meditation session, however short it might be, is to reflect on how we can dedicate whatever insights, whatever value, whatever merit we may have gleaned from our time together, and reflect on how we can bring it out into the world in whatever ways make sense for us to help make this world a better, more peaceful, and more just place. So let's spend a few moments on reflecting on how we might really practically do that in the context of our own lives. And finally, let me end by simply verbalizing my appreciation to you, Sharon, as one of the people that has been so influential in my own life and career, for all that you've done to help nurture the qualities of kindness and compassion in so many beings everywhere.
Well, thank you. It's so beautiful, really.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm just sitting here awash in the beauty of everything you said and who you are. So thank you. And I want to thank you so much for being here today. It is a real gift to spend time together and share your work with our listeners. So please be well, be happy, be peaceful.
Thank you. You the same.
Hey folks, thanks so much for listening. If you're still with us, you have reached the end of the podcast. So if you'd like to learn more about Richie's work, you can head over to his website, richardjdavidson.com. And you can also visit the Center for Healthy Minds website, which is centerhealthyminds.org. There you will find the free kindness curriculum, which is available both in English and in Spanish. And of course, Richie's got a book coming out in March, written with Cortland Dahl, another wonderful guest here on the Metta Hour. So you can check out all that good stuff. For all things Sharon, including her new children's book, Kind Karl, or if you'd like to sign up for her February meditation challenge, you can visit SharonSalzberg.com. This has been the Metta Hour podcast, brought to you by the Be Here Now Network. May you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, and may you live with ease.